Oh, I love our awkward waves so much. It's one of my favorites.
Good afternoon, everybody. Yes, we are back for our third and final session in this first round of the deep dive into learning design and pedagogy in remote and flexible learning. My name is Samantha Cunningham, and I am from the Digital Learning Services Unit at DET. And I'm very, very excited to bring you this session, which is all around building thinking, building deep learning, building student agency in digital learning. So I'm very excited to bring you Chris and Summer and Jim, who have been with us for all of these sessions, and our very special guest, Ren, who is also going to be presenting today. So welcome to everybody. We hope that you enjoy the session, and I look forward to the chat and to having everybody interacting and hearing more from you during the session. Have a great time.
Thanks, Sam.
Thanks, Sam. Hey,
Hey, friends. So just before we get into some more formal introductions, which we're going to do shortly, is I would like to spend a moment and to acknowledge country and to really consider and to think about the lands that we're all on at the moment. And we're on different lands. I'm sitting on Wurundjeri land, people of the East Kulin Nations, and really think about all of the stories that have been made on this land over tens of thousands of years, and the fact that we're making, even though it's probably a bit of a horror story, we've been making this year our own brand new pandemic story, and we're just so happy to be here and to share that with you. But we would like to take a moment to reflect and to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that we're all meeting on, and to pay our respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. And also to acknowledge and pay our respects to all of you across Victoria who are in either stage 3 or stage 4 remote learning and have decided to spend this afternoon with us, which is 3 weeks in a row. We're like best friends now. So it's so exciting to be able to be with you and to share today. So thank you very much for being with us. But who is us? Well,
that's a big existential question, Chris. Who are we?
Who are we? Well, I shall introduce my very, very good friend, Jim, who you've all met before, who is an amazing film teacher and TV producer and top model, looking at that picture there, Jim. And he's been an amazing support in this space with lots of schools looking around, particularly technology. And there's an amazing support for us here producing all of this. So all of the magic that you see happening on the screen is all down to Jim. So thanks for that. And obviously my awesome partner in crime, Summer, who is an amazing facilitator, teacher, educator, all-round top person, and has done so much work in student agency and learner agency, especially up in the NT, which I think you're going to mention later on. And we're really excited. And I'm Chris, that's me. And then Summer, you're going to introduce us to our special guest, who we are very excited to see. Are you disappearing right now, Jim, before we get under Ren?
I can do that awkwardly. Yes. Nice to meet you, Ren. And I'm going to hide out in the back. We'll see you guys a little bit later.
See you soon, Jim. Chris, you're not getting away with it that easily. For those who haven't met my fabulous friend, Chris, he is one of the sharpest minds in education and one of the most generous sharers as well. Chris is behind some of the most longest standing concepts in education, including Emerging Sciences Victoria. He was also one of those good faces behind some of the first Teach Meets as well, so was really pushing us around in our professional learning from early on. And it is always a joy to hang out with you, my dear friend.
Thanks, mate. That's so nice of you to say that.
And
more importantly,
I brought a cool friend in today. I love to bring your friends to work, but not really because you can't, kind of thing. This is Ren Gillett. I've been working with Ren for a couple of years now. She's been wearing a few different hats. Ren is currently working with Pivot and she is studying full-time. Ren started uni this year, has not been on campus yet. And I remember us having some great conversations when she was just going into about this time last year and graduating, and was so excited around that. So the game has changed. Ren worked with VIC SRC, which is our peak body for student voice in Victoria. She was on the executive committee for around 3 years and worked on strategy and different programs there as well, and will let us in on a few bits and pieces from that. Ren, we're so excited that you're here to discuss student agency, deep learning, and share your expertise in all the work you've been doing currently with student voice. What are you currently working on?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for that lovely introduction. It's very nice. Yeah, so currently I'm working as a Professional Learning's student voice advocate, and what I've been doing throughout this course of distance learning is interviewing loads of students around their experiences and really trying to help empower students throughout this process, and just trying to make sure that, you know, whilst we might not be in the classroom physically, that student voice isn't left out of these conversations, because I think now more than ever it's probably really critical that we're having these conversations. So thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited.
It is so fun. And you know that we go beyond conversation here into building an action-based toolkit. We have a big action bias, which Chris is really nicely set up in our framework for today. Do you want to go through it, or would you like me to go through it, Chris?
No, I'm very happy to do this. But as you know, for those of us who joined us before, we split our learning intentions because we know that we grow in more than just knowledge set. We're also hoping that we grow in our mindset, our skill set, and our tool sets as educators, but also as a really good lens for young people to see their own growth in remote learning. Because even though maybe we're learning a little bit less in terms of content, I'm going to make a big assumption there that maybe we've slowed down a little bit and there's a little bit less content in terms of the mindset, the skill set, and the tool sets that young people have developed through forced innovation of being at home. We know there's a huge amount of growth in there. And for you, for this workshop today, by the end of this session, in terms of knowledge, we'll have explored the voice and agency and kind of all of these words that we throw around and try to get some clarity around what we mean by empowering students and young people. We've got a ladder. We love our ladders. We've got a ladder of agency. We've got a toolkit for student involvement, and with really linked into some strategies for the home campus. In terms of mindset, as ever, it's about we've got a growth mindset, because if we didn't have that at the moment, we'd be in deep trouble. Learning designer mindsets are really thinking about how we design great learning experiences for and with our young people, and that's a really important piece of today, this idea of designing for and designing with. And the skill sets, we're going to be looking at the taxonomy of student partnership and seeing what are the skills needed to develop that, and identifying opportunity as a skill. And finally, we've got a bunch of other tools: Google Slides, Padlet, Miro, other stuff, some templates. So a bunch of tools coming your way as well. I did notice in the chat some that I'm just going to pull that up actually, that Adele, leadership partner in Bayside Peninsula, is running a PD tomorrow and using Miro as our interactive tool. Like, we love it, and we're glad you love it too, Adele. So yeah, we're going to be doing a little bit of that.
I love that. Adele, I used Miro with 100 students this week. 20 Miro boards, 100 students, worked a treat. So if I can help, do let me know. Now, just a reminder around what it is that we value as well. Again, these haven't changed. Our values for how we come together to learn have remained the same across all of our different courses here. Perfection is out, getting less wrong is in. So we really want to be able to give things a try, give them a go, and see what really sticks in your context for your learners and for your practice. We know that sharing learning is caring, and we're going to ask you to be doing a lot more brain sharing today. That Miro is the proxies that we were talking about last week. I love that image. But sharing that stuff and not saying, well, everybody is doing this. No, what's ordinary to you might be extraordinary to someone else in their practice. And also remembering that this is not a, hey, we have the answers, here you go. This is really co-constructed. There's no answers yet, but we do know that we have the building blocks. And some of these building blocks, Chris, are really important, and we've baked them in, haven't we?
Absolutely. And there are a number of, my clicking expertise is getting even better every week. Smooth and seamless clicking. And so some of the those structures that we've baked into this are those ones that we already use, right? So Victorian Department and Victorian government schools already do an amazing job using the FISO model, using E5 as a design model, and then those high impact teaching strategies. So we've taken all of those, and because we know you're already really good at those and are implementing those really well. And then we've baked into that, we've used them as the real foundational pieces for everything that we have been sharing over the last couple of weeks, and will continue to share after this. So just remembering that this is not reinventing the wheel, and that's a really important piece for us all. It is about using what we already do so well and building upon it.
And noting that in FISO, we know that student agency and engagement is right at the core. So it's really good that this session has come to wrap everything up as well. So where have we been before, Chris? Just that quick kind of snapshot of our course.
Yeah, so the microcourse 1, Architecture of a Learning Experience, reimagining formative and summative assessment, exploring solo taxonomy and some other tools last week. And today is all about that deeper learning, transparent thinking, and student agency. And you will note that it is called microcourse 1. And the reason it's called microcourse 1 is that there is indeed a microcourse 2. And we're going to tell you all about that at the end of this session. And we're very excited to be able to extend a little bit more of the work that we're going to do with you.
And we know that there's been 2 parameters that we have been, playing with, tinkering with, and then really cementing into practice. The first being around that social and emotional well-being of the school community. And the second one, importantly, when we're looking at this remote and online digital learning, as Sam has been calling it, the continuity of learning on the home campus. So we know that both of those parameters are incredibly important if we are to design that education worth having for and with our young people as well. So in this session, we are really focusing in on 3 of those key design principles. We've touched on most of them, but you can see that we will deepen this again in course 2. We won't give away too much. We're looking at the kindness to yourself and others, and Ren will be sharing some of the research that can give us those clues and indicators for what students are really looking for when we're thinking around that social emotional well-being piece and that kindness as a design factor. And then we're really looking closely at 8 and 9, the multiple pathways, how to get from point A to point wherever. Chris is sharing one of his renowned tool sets to go with that, which is excellent. And we've got Ren here as that expert to really dive into learner agency, the choice, voice, and responsibility piece as well. So if we wanted to look at that in what might that look like when we've got the foundation, we're really looking at the foundation of kindness, and on top of that, considering the multiple pathways and the agency as well. So the current assumption that we're really working from today is this, that now more than ever, student empowerment is a fundamental principle of deep learning. So we know that that's the goal, the deep learning, the pervasive engagement, students that are hungry for more. We know that that kind of learning that sticks with us and really makes a difference is what we're looking at. We have that deep assumption, and we know that it is bound in research, that student empowerment is fundamental in that, but now more than ever. Ren, what does deep learning look like, sound like, feel like? What is it all about?
Well, when I think about deep learning, I think about students sort of taking what they've learned in one situation and being able to apply it to another, and being really proactive about that. And I think when we talk about agency, it's sort of like the stepping stone to deep learning, because when we ask students to be agents in their own learning, we're asking students to practice voice, but also sort of make choices about the way that they learn. And that's sort of practicing and really embedding that in the way that you learn, and realizing, this is how I learn best, and I want to learn this way. That definitely is critically connected to deep learning, because it means that students are taking what they know, what they learn, how they learn best, and then applying that to different situations, and it really fosters that growth mindset, and it really fosters like this sort of thirst for learning.
I love that. Chris, why now more than ever, do you think?
100% there. I think what we've realized, and I was working with a wonderful government primary school this morning to explore those challenges that are in this remote and flexible learning environment. And the big one was all around engagement and deep learning. And it was all around the struggles of that, being at home, and you might actually be very much more tempted to go and play on your PlayStation or stay in bed and hide under the doona, because actually that's a better option than having to learn at this time. And so what we know is that at this very moment, the schools are doing an incredible job, but the choice element of students is actually greater than probably ever before, because they're not in the room. So the teacher isn't able to go around and say, come on, you can do this. And, it help to engage that kind of agency and say, this is a choice you're making, and all those kind of things we can do so easily in a classroom, not that easily, but in a physical space, we can do it much more easily. The actual onus is so much more on learners. And what I think to some extent, sadly, and I've heard a few stories of this, that some learners don't feel like they have the skills or the permission to actually have control over their learning, and have never had that in their learning. And so now they're in a forced innovation stage where they have had to apply that empowerment and to really take that empowerment on. maybe it's a really huge learning for us for when we do go back into school, and we're super excited to really consider that, to really get back into that space of being back together physically. That hopefully some of that empowerment will be much more visible and much more controlled and owned by our learners as well.
Nice. So when we start to consider, well, then what is this whole concept of empowerment? We've got this deep learning concept, but we need to really look at, this empowerment concept. Chris, we've sort of come up with a little bit of a model here as well. And the model really showcases to us that empowerment sort of, is the all-encompassing. And within that, there's sort of three elements here. There's the voice, the choice, and the responsibility. If we have all of those juggling along together, then we know that we've got that empowerment. And this isn't a stage or an age-based thing, Ren. This is very much all students can have a sense of empowerment from whatever stage or age they're learning from, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's something that you see in primary school students and secondary school students, and I'm even feeling it now as a first year.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we're going to be then exploring, well, how do we purposefully activate voice? How do we purposefully design choice? And particularly, as Chris was saying, really have our eye on, in an online world, that concept of responsibility. So if we can just have a quick look at agency then. So what is, agency? Ren, you were saying it's the difference between being having, that ownership and having that kind of deep knowledge of self, or just being sort of tapped on the shoulder. So this comes from Department of Education and Training here in Victoria, that agency can be thought of occurring in degrees that range from, nothing at all to full-on shared decision-making with adults. In fact, there's 8 points of agency in this particular framework here. So Ren, what do you think agency is not then? Can you give us some examples of what it might not look like?
Yeah, well, I think sort of a really good example that sort of Pivot uses, it's sort of like this idea of moving from feedback in isolation to feedback in dialogue. So there's a difference between asking students for feedback, tapping them on the back, like you said, having them, I guess, give feedback on a project that's already been created by teachers. I feel like that's not really what agency is. I feel like agency is when you actually co-design these things with students and collaborate with students and have that partnership that really, it's really the difference between listening and being heard and actually acting upon what is said. I think the dialogue around feedback is really what makes it come alive, and that's what makes the difference between, just simply voice and agency.
Nice. It's also not co-curricular. We're not talking about those who are student leaders or in an SRC club. This is all the time in learning, baked in kind of stuff. So one of the big things that we'll be looking at today is really looking at, well, what does it look like, sound like, feel like, and now and in the future for your learners? Your learners better than anyone, some of the challenges that they face, some of the opportunities that they have, some of the wills and wants and needs around there as well. So we know that there's a whole range of learners and learning situations out there. We're here to build that toolkit so that agency is for all students and not just some that fit in.
And I just want to pull up that I think Margarita, who we're so happy to have back again, who's been with us, I think, for all 3 weeks, makes a really great point around that, to take the idea of children with additional needs, additional learning needs, and access needs. What is agency there? And absolutely, agency is a big part of this. Agency does not get rid of things like differentiation and structured and scaffolded support for all learners. In fact, I think it's so much more powerful to be able to, where we possibly can, is to listen and to take that feedback in, and agency actually supports that really, really strongly. So I think that's awesome. And I just, from a technical point of view, same question, Margarita, about the closed captioning. So the YouTube stream will have auto closed captions on the recording. We haven't quite got the technical ability to get live closed captioning, but that is coming in one of the other systems that we're hoping to use as well. So there are closed captions in the recording of this, just to answer that question for you. Awesome. And thank you again for joining us again.
Yes, absolutely. And it's just in one of those key pieces I was going to put in to some of course 2. I've been working with some of my associate special schools up in Queensland as well, just around that learner agency at this learner agency and wellbeing at this point in time too. So I look forward to sharing those things when they're available. All right, so Chris, we'll kick on to some of the key concepts that we will be sharing today. We're looking at 5 keys to empowering learning. So rather than it being sort of a rhetorical thing, there are some keys there that we can use. Ren and I were looking at all of the research that's out there, some of the work that she's doing in order to develop these keys. And we sort of thought, well, it's like being given the keys to the agency castle, right? You know, there's the key to the front door, there's the key to the side garage, there's the key to whatever other rooms. I mean, I live in a but the big thing there is that there's different spaces and places we want to be able to access. So to think of these in terms of keys is a really, really great way to consider it. We've got student reflection and choice and a really great toolkit there. And this sort of voice versus agency, all we wanted to do was put that out there because there's so many different terms that are there and we want to get really clear and solid for you there as well. All right, Ren, talk to me about some of these findings here. Now, we know that it's an emerging piece, but you've had a lot to do with VIC SRC. So first up, you might tell us a little bit about what are VIC SRC and why do they care about student voice? And we've got sort of a couple of snapshots of what they've been finding over the past couple of weeks.
Perfect. So VIC SRC stands for the Victorian Student Representative Council. So as someone mentioned before, they're basically the peak body representing school-aged students in Victoria, and their advisory committee is made up of 12 students from all across Victoria, and they are really key spokespeople for students across the state. And this is a report that they did and released not very long ago at all. And so, yeah, I'm going to speak to this research and also some of the interviews that I've had. Whilst I might not have sound bites right now, I've just started a podcast, which I will someone will send the link out later, but yeah, that will have more info. But yeah, so 68% of students said that one of the best things about learning from home was that they could learn at their own pace. And that is definitely something that a lot of students have voiced. I think it's definitely the biggest positive from a lot of students. They love having the flexibility to sort of learn in the way that they sort of feel suits them. So I guess it's sort of maybe for students that haven't experienced that agency before, having that experience for some students is actually really positive, and what has made this experience of learning from home potentially better from just learning in a normal class environment. And 60% of students told us that they feel more comfortable at home, and that is wonderful. For those students who have a really good home life, that's great. And I guess a lot of students have also voiced that it's a lot more convenient. You know, you don't have to travel anywhere. You can do it in your pajamas if you don't have to turn on your camera. So there are a lot of things that, you know, make some students feel like it's a more comfortable space. But that being said, not the situation for all students. We're all you know, living at our homes a lot, and that not everyone is fortunate enough to be brought up in a house that is really supportive, and that's the reality. But it's great that students are feeling more comfortable. Around 1/3, so 33% of students said that they enjoyed spending more time with their family. That's wonderful. We don't really get to learn with our mum and sister right there most of the time, and that's what a lot of students have voiced as well. And the same number said that it was better because it was quieter. And I think that is true for students that like learning in their own space. This is definitely a really great alternative and something that not a lot of people have experienced before. So I think, yeah, in those ways, it's been a really positive experience, but there are definitely some things that students haven't liked as much, which I think will be.
Those in just 1 minute. I just want to stick on the kind of liking things here, Ren. Heidi has asked what year level to ask. They actually asked, I think it was from year 1 right up into year 12. And the report is split out into primary school and secondary school as well. These were some sort of broad findings. It's a really nice interim report, I suppose, lots of sound bites, lots of those sort of stats that they've had a look at. And this was quite interesting to say more students reported that they enjoyed that pace and that they enjoyed that learning environment around the comfort zone at least, and that could just be a Melbourne winter. But it's interesting. It should be like aha for us as learning designers to think, how might we take advantage of that? How might we harness that student voice as well? Heidi, that report is also in our link farm later as well, so you don't have to go looking for it. But Ren, there were some things where they sort of said, I wish it was a little bit different. And this is kind of interesting for us as well.
Yeah, so definitely the first one is around not being able to interact with friends and classmates. And that's the biggest thing, when you speak to any student of any age, it's not being able to see my friends. And I think that doesn't necessarily just apply to students. It applies to educators. It applies to pretty much, everyone. So I think we can all empathize with that to some degree. And also, something that a lot of VCE students specifically have voiced as well is that they're missing out on these key social milestones in their school life. Someone said, it feels like what we've been preparing for our whole secondary experience for, these 6 years of schooling has sort of been ripped out from under us, which is super unfortunate. No formals. They don't even know what their graduation is going to look like. And that's a really unfortunate reality, and that's something that a lot of people are empathizing with at the moment and experiencing. And then it's not having enough communication with teachers. So I guess that is a problem that a lot of students have also voiced. So not being able to access their teachers in the same way possible. And a really good example of this, and something that opened my eyes as well, is that in a normal classroom, right, you have you're sort of able to raise your hand, and then your teacher will come to you privately, and you can have a conversation about something that you're struggling with in private. But what a lot of students sort of said was that they were being asked, whether they had questions in a format like this, right? Where if, say, I had a question and you were my teacher, Summer, we would be having this conversation, and it would be completely public to the rest of the class because our mics are on and everyone can listen. And so it's difficult because some teachers are like, well, I'm giving them the option to, speak up, and they're not taking it. But it's really difficult. And I guess it sort of comes back to this idea that we were all experiencing this, well, a lot of us, for the very first time, and so no one truly knows how to navigate this perfectly. And so it's about learning from these sorts of things. But that was something that I heard from a student that was like, yeah, that makes so much sense.
I've seen lots of teachers actually take that on board and saying, well, let's find more ways than we ever had before to communicate with our students. But you're very right there. And I love these two stats are a 50-50. It's a very fence. Yeah. Some say it's fine. Some say not enough. And I just want to be really aware for all of our teachers. It's definitely that case of there is no right answer. It's definitely thinking about knowing exactly what your students need, knowing what you're able to give as well. We just wanted to put these stats up there because these are some of the only emerging stats that we've got. There's too much work by teachers, Ren. What's been the word on the street on that?
Well, a lot of students have sort of felt like their teachers feel like they're not learning as much at home. And so they've sort of tried to compensate that by saying, here's some extra work to keep you engaged and keep you learning and maybe make up for that missed learning that is happening at home. And that's been a huge concern for mainly older students as well, because basically, what the reason why a lot of students are already finding it really difficult to learn from home is because of the overwhelming nature of this entire situation. It's new, it's weird, it's scary, and so that's what's potentially making it difficult to learn from home to begin with. And then when you're overloaded with more work to try and compensate for a feeling that's sort of already born from something that is quite scary, it just doesn't really work. And it basically, it just sort of feels like a lot of students have voiced that they just feel too overwhelmed, and it just doesn't really work. And sort of like getting mixed advice. One student even said, they said, our teachers telling us it's okay to take a step back, and sort of sending us resources that tell us, just sort of turn your camera off, take a step back when you're feeling a bit overwhelmed. But then at the same time, they're giving us more work to do than usual and normal. And so it's like, well, the messages are mixed. So yeah, that's definitely something that students have voiced. But going back to what you said before as well, though, engagement is subjective. Everything is subjective, and the best way to know what works for your students is by asking them directly.
And it is as simple and as difficult as that, Ren. It's as simple and as hard as that. So
yeah.
these stats, they're interesting. We want to know kind of your reactions to them. So we're going to fly you by the magic of the internet into Miro, and we've got a nice sort of bubble with all of those different quotes up on there. And your only directive there is grab a Post-it note, think about that student voice feedback and add your reaction, maybe a question, maybe a strategy, kind of that gut feel around each of those data points that we've put up there. There might be some things that you're doing to address them or something that you're doing conversing around those. So if I give you an example, that last one of 50% say that there's too much work. I'm working with a principal at the moment who continues to say my mantra is less is more, less is more, less is more. So I would put a Post-it note like that up, for example. So we'll give you about 5 minutes. Chris, does that sound about right?
That sounds awesome. So Jim's popped the link into the chat. I might bring some of you to me who are already in. We're filling up to 26. Something I did notice the other day, somebody called out that they get a little bit seasick motion sick when they see all of the arrows flying around. So I just wanted to point out to you that if you go up to the top right next to where our kind of icons are, which I know you can't, you should be able to see that probably up here, there is a blue arrow which says hide collaborators cursors. And if you click on that, all of the cursors disappear. So you don't feel like all these things are zooming around and making you feel motion sickness. So I quite like it. I find it exciting to see all these ideas flying, but otherwise, just click on that old collaborators cursors and they will all disappear. So I'm going to set that timer for just on, let's go for 4 minutes and 30 seconds and start that timer there. And get in there, share some ideas, share some thoughts though, and you've got reactions to this because it's new data for us and it's very exciting to get that data from our learners. If you have any problems, just drop them into the chat in the YouTube live and we will help you out with that.
And if you've got any questions for Ren, she's working every day in talking to students of all ages to find out their perspectives around schooling, learning, their well-being. She's really asking a lot of those questions. So it might just be an interesting thing to think more broadly about learners and learning in general too. So please feel free to pop some questions for Ren in there.
So I'm just going to put a little bit of ambient chill out lounge music on.
A little bit of ambient chill out.
Just mute it if you don't want to hear it. Oh, I think I stopped the music there.
You're done with
5 seconds early. Sorry. All right. Can we just call a few of these out? Some I know you've been doing that just now, but there are some really fantastic, interesting strategies, but also some reactions. And the one that I've just seen a couple of times brought up was this idea of I've just lost it now. Parents' feedback is there isn't enough. So the student feedback was too much work given by teachers, and yet there's some parents' feedback is that there isn't enough learning at times. And I love the way that we've said work versus learning in there. That's a really interesting kind of language differentiation there. So that's a really interesting gut reaction is students think there's too much and then parents think there's not enough. So maybe there's some clarity and communication that we can support at home to help people understand what learning is and looks like, and that students are getting enough of it.
Chris, you'll remember last week, and it went out across socials today as well, is our sort of home learning support guide for parents and guardians. And in that it does talk around, cognitive load. We're letting them into some of our teacher talk, and that might be something that's really helpful in starting to educate parents about actually being in front of a Zoom might be something that you have to do for work or whatever video platform, but we know the learner's brain a little bit better, and therefore this is why we've structured work as we have. A tricky thing, certainly not an easy, but we've got some tools there to support you as well. Anything else that you saw?
And Ren, shout out if there's anything that you see which you want to call out.
Yeah.
But the another one that's definitely in there is the find it interesting that we are letting students relax a bit in terms of work amounts, but teacher workload is still massive.
Yeah.
Like the amount that we're working in schools is pretty insane at the moment.
Totally insane at the moment, I'm going to say.
Okay. Ren, anything else?
I like the sticky note, do less, but do it better. But it's difficult because I think going back to that other sticky note that you just read out, it's sort of like when we're having these conversations around how to better improve education for students through this online medium, it just sort of inherently implies more work for teachers to try and figure out, well, how do we do this? And so it's a really difficult balance, and I just think it speaks to that. And I also am seeing a lot of sticky notes around putting students in small groups, which is amazing. And my sister, who's in year 10, that's been her favorite thing. And the well-being day as well. I love the focus on well-being because mental health is the biggest issue at the moment. So yeah, there's some positives.
There's one here, Chris, that I just want to draw attention to. How do we recreate this once we're back at school? How can we ensure students have ability to learn at their own pace back in the classroom without being directed every 45 minutes? What a beautiful design challenge. And again, we don't have the answers, but we have the building blocks. In course 2, we're actually deliberately spending a fair bit of time saying, it's awesome. We've now got a tool set, skill set, knowledge set, mindset around online pedagogies. How do we then get that kind of brackish water if we're going back into face-to-face settings to keep some of, the really great stuff that we have put in place in terms of structures or practices as well. So we can assure you that is something that we're addressing too.
Awesome. As ever, like, it just blows my mind and inspires me to hang out with you and to see you share your ideas so freely and so candidly. So thank you so much for that. So we are going to come back. We've got another couple of things on the Miro board once we get into some more tool based, and we've actually got a tool that we want you to use, and we're going to come back and use the Miro shortly. But let's crack on then, Summer, with let me just reshare my screen so I can get the beautiful, there we go, slides up there. So let's crack on a little bit, and just maybe if you want to take us through some of the findings in terms of those kind of keys to empowering learners. And what we're going to ask for this one is we do want some more interaction, please. We love having you in the chat. We think it's such an important part of this, is that we want to hear from you and love hearing from you, and love it when you, like Angela and Katrina, haven't seen each other today. So they've caught up in the chat on the YouTube live, which is just beautiful. What we'd love you to do is kind of between Summer and Ren, and I'll probably just sit back a little bit, but they're going to go through these 5 kind of keys to empowering learners and give you at least an example. And what we'd love is, like, the first one we're going to look at is trust. So when Summer and Ren kind of go through this idea of trust, then what we'd love you to do is just in the chat this time. You can put it on the Miro board if you want, if you love Miro so much. But we'd love to see you interacting in the chat as well, just to say, this is the thing I've done around trust as well, because it's a really lovely way for us to capture those thoughts for people too.
Thanks, Chris. So between the work that Ren is doing, some of the work that we've been doing over the past few years in Victoria and in the Northern Territory, Evidence for Learning and SVA have really been engaged in looking at what are some real fundamental principles and practices to put in place to make sure that students are super empowered to be partners in their learning. Distilling all of that, we've looked at these 5 keys, and we reckon if you can consider these 5 keys in any number of kind of ways, that you're definitely further up that ladder. So the first one, Ren, is trust. So what do we mean when we say trust? Give me an example.
Well, I think we all sort of have like a general idea of what trust is. And I think in the context of a classroom, I guess when trust is established, you have sort of like the ability to sort of hand over responsibility. I sort of see that as being one of the biggest examples of trust within the classroom. And I think what Chris was speaking to earlier is sort of like the fact that now that we're in an online context, that responsibility is so much heavier, and students are being asked to be so much more self-directed. And so in an online context, trust is incredibly important. And I'd sort of say that it's that responsibility to a certain degree. I don't know what, yeah, what do you?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely fostering responsibility. So an example for me would be, here's the brief, here's when we need to meet the brief. By period 5, here's some clear expectations, some scaffolding. We'll see you then. I expect you to check in, once, whatever those structures are, and we'll get to that soon. But the trust is saying, I'm not going to be on you every 5 minutes. Your screen doesn't have to be on, that you will get that done. So I'm going to get you to put in the chat, how have you built trust with your learners in an online environment? How have you built trust? What are some of those tangible ways that you have done that? Yeah, of course, all the asynchronous offline world. I think when we often, Chris, say the online world, we're sort of saying we're at school or we're somewhere else.
Somewhere not school, home campus.
So that's right. Building trust, as you said, Ren, really builds that responsibility. Something else you want to add in there?
Oh, and I think it goes both ways, because I mean, when we're talking about student voice specifically as well, so there's definitely like from the teacher to the student, so teachers being able to trust that their students will do the right thing, but also from students to teachers, knowing that potentially when they speak their mind or they provide feedback, that the teachers are going to involve that meaningfully, and sort of trusting that it's not necessarily just going to be like a token sort of, yep, tick box sort of thing, that it's actually going to be involved meaningfully. So I guess that trust there, which then sort of flows into consistency, which we can get into in a second.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, you might be having a bit of a think about that trust. I'm really interested, because obviously that's going to be quite different for learners of different ages and stages as well. So interested in how you're tangibly building that, or how you might. So keep thinking about that in the chat or on the Miro as well. The consistency piece is a really significant one. That's a key, isn't it? Because too often we might say, well, we let them have that sort of voice thing go on over there, and then we just went back to business as usual. So why is consistency key, and what is it, Ren?
I think consistency is sort of like the key to students being proactive about agency and actually feeling like they do have a voice, because again, what I sort of think is there's a difference between voice and agency, and what I think that difference is largely due to this idea of feedback in dialogue, having conversations around this feedback and seeing action come out of what students are saying, rather than it just sort of being a, like I said before, like a tick box sort of thing, like, yeah, we ask students throughout the process, but actually sort of having them as a partner throughout that process. And in terms of consistency, it's about students feeling like, this isn't just a one-off thing. This is a consistent process. Teachers want to build a partnership where they are able to sort of co-design things on a more consistent level. And in that way, if we're talking about empowering, that is the key to empowering students. When they feel like there's consistency there, it really instills this idea that we actually do have a voice. It's not just like a one-off thing where we've actually been listened to. It's a I guess it makes a difference between, being listened to once and actually having a voice and being an active member in these discussions consistently. Consistency is the key for me.
Yeah, nice. And that goes from trust, doesn't it? That, well, this is part of business now. This is what we do and how we do it. We know there's structures in place in Victoria as well, where that consistency is built in by structures. We'll get to structures in a minute, but that consistency, are there any examples that we have of this consistent agency student partnership that you have put into place? Do you do something every Monday? Is there something around every process that you go through for hiring staff, perhaps? Chris, do you have any examples you'd like to throw in for consistency?
There are some more coming, and what I would love to do is throw up some examples from the chat, which is going really strong, which is awesome. I'll put them up pretty quickly and skip through them. But if I don't, sorry,
you're okay.
I have a frog in my throat.
I haven't heard that term forever.
So giving them, Philippa gives students the opportunity to create, which is a really trusting thing to do, right? Love that. Kirby, setting up expectations and trust both ways. I will do this so that you can do that. I love that. This one, not that I have favorites, but I think this one is close to being my favorite about, I explain that science experiments require trust. And when you've got kids to work on science experiments at home, that they need to have their parents, guardians' permission. I love that one, Marcus. I think it's so cool to imagine all these students at home doing their experiments. I just love that you're trusting to do that. Jen, which is a great point, was that she has worked really hard and it is hard, but she's really fortunate to have worked in term one and actually built up those expectations and that they have flowed through. So that's a really great comment there as well. Oh, I've just jumped over loads of them. Then Charlene, giving students time to discuss connections they're making to their learning, either books they're reading and group chat so they can share personal experiences. So a real trust piece there. Consistently, I love this from Jojo as well. So consistency is something tangible, it's reliable, and it's safe. It makes us feel like something is consistent and in control in a world where lots of them aren't. There are so many more, but I will just rock through a couple, giving some prompt feedback, letting them know that we're there with and for them. I love that, Karen. That's really beautifully phrased. Just giving you some prompt feedback on your comment. Model to the students that as teachers, we are vulnerable and learning. Absolutely so true. Thanks, Charlene. Gemma, remind students that they are your partners in learning. So very similar, which I love, that idea of being partners in learning. Responding to in a meaningful way to their thoughts, ideas, and comments. Brilliant. Predictability and in routine in those morning sessions. That's really powerful. Being open from Katrina, and just know that they're there for you. Like, and we're all, you know, I love that. That makes me want to be in all of your classes.
I know.
Because I feel like I would be valued. It's so good. Giving primary age students the opportunity to email their classmates, their teachers, and to participate in group chats on Teams. So a connection. Small group meetings from Jen. And again, it's that consistency in those, which is great. Margot, trust that it's okay to not know all the answers and mistakes of learning. And then, they keep coming in. Just brilliant. Give the students role in group meetings so they can take the lead. So love that, Charlene. So giving that control, handing over the locus of control to the students. And Robert, around giving the students choice in the mode of delivery of tasks, like how am I going to make this or create it. Keep them coming. That's absolutely fabulous. And I think we actually got some structure, some consistency in there as well, some.
Yeah, definitely. There was definitely some consistency in there. And I think at this point in time, why that was a really big key to empowering learners, particularly in the online and remote settings, is there has been all the consistency or certainty sort of stripped away from us. So that being a key to really building all the others. You can see they kind of almost Venn all over each other as well, but the consistency, designing the reliability in, will absolutely help your learners to fly. So the structures, we had a fair bit on structures there as well. This is talking about structures in your class, structures across maybe year groups and in your school, but also systemic structures. So I just wanted to say that VIC SRC has all sorts of policy positions in place where students must be on boards, where students are encouraged to be in hiring processes, for example. So at a policy level, Victoria is one of the only states, definitely the only state in Australia, but one of the only places across the world that has that in policy. But in terms of some of the other structures, Ren, I think that we've actually got some great examples from the chat there. It's how we deliver our feedback. It's how we set up our classes for the day. Is there anything else you wanted to add to structure?
I think you've covered it really perfectly. And I mean, my sort of example that I think distinguishes structures from space and opportunity, I might get into when we talk about space and opportunity, but I think structures is sort of like having a room that's sort of there, which then sort of invites the space. But there's a difference between having a room and having a space, which I'll get into in a second. But the examples there are already great.
Love it. And when we're looking at safety, I love that Tal's put in there this question, am I ready to learn from my students? Actually, that fosters a psychological safety that also fosters, a real that we're in this together. So the safety comes definitely from the trust. We actually want there to be obviously real safety. So we know that there are particularly digital structures in place so that students feel that they are actually safe. In order to be able to fully participate in an online and remote situation and in sharing their work, but also that psychological safety to say, hey, are you here to catch me? Again, you can come with consistency. You can see why they're sort of on that same level playing field.
And I just threw in there some from the chat from Jo, which was really interesting because she notices that on-site children are working really well, even though they've not got their daily teachers. And I think this shows how well the students feel safe at school. So it's such a good challenge for us and such an incredibly hard challenge to make sure that our children feel, as safe in learning, which sounds weird, right? It sounds like they should feel safer at home for some reason, but that idea of in this online and remote world that we're currently in, a remote and flexible world that we're currently in, doesn't have to be online, is that how do we make them feel safe in the same way they feel when they're at school. So thanks so much for that, Joe. And Jen's noticed that too, which is awesome.
I love that, Joe. It's also made me think of that design challenge as well. How can we really get that mindset that we're all every student's teacher in this school rather than just our class as well? So Ren, space and opportunity, tell me about it.
Yeah, so I guess my example is, so you can have a room, but it can be sort of stuffed with heaps of furniture and there can actually be no real space to move. And so that's sort of the difference between having a structure and having a space, is that the difference between the room and the space is that, well, when you have an opportunity, there's space to move within that room. You know, like you have the room there, which is great. That's sort of like the first step. But when teachers actually invite students and really encourage them to speak up and make them feel like they do have a voice, which is sort of a combination of trust, consistency, and safety. And when they're sort of all combined, I think that that's when students really feel like they do have the space and the opportunity to actually speak up in a way that's meaningful and not just token, because I think that's something that we've also been talking about as well, as the difference between token and meaningful and authentic. And I really liked also what you said as well, just in terms of like consistency and all of these things. Like the big thing about online learning is that lots of teachers have sort of made a format that is predictable, but overall it's just an extremely unpredictable time for a lot of young people, and it's really scary. And I guess if you can establish trust that and have that relationship with your students throughout this process, maybe have well-being check-ins as well, which a lot of teachers have mentioned as well, which is great. Consistency, making them feel like this is an ongoing thing. This isn't a one-off. That's a really good sense of security and reliability, which someone said in the chat, which I wrote the 3 points down because I really liked it. And safety, I think, they're all really perfect, and they all sort of work to creating these structures and then creating the opportunity, which is the real opening that allows students to participate meaningfully.
Nice. So when we start to have a look at these in terms of variables, and what I want is in that chat, keep that going, particularly around the how do you create those safe spaces for students to authentically be, feel, and actually be empowered, and the space and opportunity. We always have a bit of a tinker with these variables, don't we, Chris? So we've taken those 5 keys to student empowerment and thought about them in terms of, yes, we're looking at them in an online, and we know that they also apply when we're back at school. But I wanted to really take a good look at this space opportunity. It's quite an interesting one when we are in our remote and online environments, because there are lots of different opportunities for students to showcase some passion projects, to actually go beyond the realms of a timetable, perhaps to participate in some forums that sit outside of the school. So it might actually be that this is a variable that's a bit more under control than it usually would be in the school site. Is this something that you're hearing, Ren, from students that you've been chatting with?
That there's more structures?
That there's more opportunities and space for them to show their empowerment?
Yeah, well, I think learning in an online context, it's sort of like we've all been thrust into a situation that is relatively foreign to a lot of us. And so I think there's been a lot more opportunity for teachers and students to co-design these next steps forward, because they're new. And so I think, a lot of students have voiced that there has been more opportunities, and they've also said that their teachers are actually engaging with them a lot more on sort of like a personal level, which is also really lovely to hear, because this is such a hard time emotionally, and I think lots of teachers are understanding that, which is wonderful. And so I would say yes.
Yeah, nice. So it's just a thought to have there around the variables. Chris?
Sorry, I was just going to say, just as you were saying that, Ryan, in the chat, Jessica said, be real and relate your life to theirs. So I thought that was just a very timely collision there. So beautiful. Yeah,
nice. I really like what Marcus has said there in the chat as well, that actually this sort of idea that we are, not doing the commute perhaps, more time and opportunity to extend themselves or delve deeper. So it's kind of a nice little shining light that has come out of our remote learning, is our student empowerment. And we wanted to get very, very clear on how we can harness that, how we can really amplify it so that we can embed it in whatever is thrown at us next, whatever kind of learning environment is thrown at us next. So, Chris, shall we kick over to our ladders so that we can have a bit of a look at this? Because I know you've got something really exciting to share with us. What I wanted to just touch base on is that a really easy thing for you, once you've wrapped your head around it, is to create ladders of empowerment or ladders of engagement. What this means is that we are able to get from one point to another through some specific ways of acting. So if I can give you an example, let's say that we wanted to all get on board an environmental cause, that we really believe that we should be all saving the planet. Now, if an organisation came to us and said, Ren, you absolutely are on board our cause. I know that you believe in saving the planet, but the only way that you can do that is by chaining yourself to a front of a whaling ship. You'd probably say, oh, I've got lots of other things to do, and But if that was your only option, you'd have to opt out, really, right? Now, if I mean, yeah, go on. Ren, you'd probably say,
no, it's probably an odd. Don't. Yes, I probably would opt out.
But you know, if you're only given one option, it doesn't take into account other things that might be going on, other factors and variables. So by looking at a ladder, we could then say, using our same example of saving the environment, well, what if you signed this petition? What if you then gave up your plastic bags? What if you came along to this online rally? What if you then decided to give monthly donations? And you can see that you're actually climbing up that ladder to get to the front of the whaling ship. You're probably at the whaling ship then going, how did I get here? Because somebody has actually created a nice way for you to climb up to that. So we're doing the same here with student empowerment. When we want to go from this sort of voice to agency, we're really looking at, we want to go from doing things to students in their learning, transitioning to doing things for students in their learning, and ultimately be hanging a lot more in that space of doing things with students in their learning. So if we were to start to unpack this a little bit more, Ren and I sort of started to look at, there's some level 1 choices, right? These level 1 choices are a little bit the kind of 2 and going to the 4. So we probably would see ourselves mainly hovering. Ren, what would be your experience within that level that you experience most at school?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I was definitely caught up in sort of like the student leadership sector, and I think that is definitely an area where people think a lot of voice happens, but I sort of tend to feel as though that's not necessarily the truth. Like having a leadership position, I don't think it should necessarily give you the ability to have a voice that's louder than other students. But I think that's sort of the reality of what happens in a lot of cases. You know, a lot of events are held and they're like, we'll bring along the student leaders, or we want to have a conversation about this, so we'll invite the student leaders, when actually probably the people that need to be at the center of those conversations, especially if we're talking about engagement, probably need to be the students that aren't actually engaged. And generally the student leaders are the people who are. So in terms of some level 1 thinking, it's sort of just having them there, not really consistently, not really completely implementing what is said. It's sort of more of a level 1 sort of tick box sort of thing.
Nice. So there's that sort of assigned role, there's some choice, and this isn't to say that level 1 is bad by any means. You're on that ladder of getting students empowered, but we would say that this is probably sitting at the lower rungs of the ladder, where there's roles assigned, students kind of know why they're involved, but there hasn't been much apart from sort of being, you know, wheeled out to something. So if we have a bit of a look at level 2, this is where we start to level up. And once we're hitting these middle rungs of the ladder, we're going, hey, this is what we're doing for students in their learning and then with. So when we look at this in an online environment, this is where we start to say, all right, you might come up with a project and then you might actually consult students on. You still might make the resourcing decisions, you still might lead the timelines, but there is some student input there. It's where we start to see collaboration happening, students having choice around assessment, how they want to show their work. Then this level sort of 7 and 8 is where we get this whole idea of student initiated and directed. This is sort of the width, and this is where as teachers we all go, we take our deep breath here and we almost have to unsettle ourselves and our role here. This student initiated and directed, where adults are consulted, they'll guide, they'll advise, they'll resource only, but largely they will give over that agency. And our level 8 is significant. Student initiated, there's shared decision making. So actually teachers and students are on that shared decision making journey together. This doesn't happen overnight. It takes a lot of practice and a lot of structures in place. But it's interesting to say, actually, with all of our online principles and our keys, we can really get to those levels sort of 6, 7, and 8 quite nicely just by thinking, how might we level this up? All right. Chris, is there anything that you wanted to add in there before I provide some examples of what this looks like?
Yeah, just that very shortly we'll be getting into looking at some really simple practical approaches that we can use to help students to be in this space. And I think one of the things that I love that and Ren's point is really powerful one, is that we're not just talking about student voice and student agency and empowerment in a leadership role, which is often where we think it lives. When we talk about student voice, we think, oh, it's the student council, it's those kind of things. It's really talking about it in a learning, taking responsibility and having agency over our own learning right at this point. So I love the fact that we've got both of those in there. Is anyone having I'd be interested, just genuine question. I wonder if anyone is having what do you call SRCs, or like student representative groups or meetings online at the moment, whether that's a thing that's been put on hold or whether it's a thing that's actually still happening. That is a genuine just wondering. If anyone in the chat is doing that, let us know. All right, so give us some examples then.
Yeah, I just wanted to give you some quick examples so that this didn't feel like, well, hang on, that's really ace, but is this really happening at those level up? Absolutely. The Northern Territory Learning Commission, these are primary school students that are given their school data. They're given all of their PATs and their NAPLANs, and they're given the ASIPs. They have a look at what they find interesting. They come up with a concept they'd like to explore further. Teachers then are resourcing that, but they are partners in that decision making as well. And they actually then make some recommendations and report their findings to the minister. So I just wanted to show you there that is in the middle of Catherine in the Northern Territory, where we have an AITSL board member, we have a whole bunch of highly accomplished and lead teachers, the general manager of school and system improvement down on his knee taking advice from young people. And one of the very most significant moments in my life when students asked John Hattie if he knows much about data and would he like to know the difference between qualitative and quantitative. So students as partners in their learning, it was a Gonski recommendation, absolutely happening in the Territory, so you can have a look at that project.
Okay, I'm just going to check this up for a second from Heidi. Yeah. Awesome. Oh, look at this. Actually, I've got loads of them coming in.
Oh, I love it. A podcast.
Digital school assemblies. We've got our school doing creating talent shows, and the students creating a bulletin. Oh, these are the kind of gems that we just want to surface so much, right?
Absolutely. We'll capture that chat and make sure that we put that in the toolkit that we will develop from everything from your Miro as well. That's awesome. Love it. This is a really interesting example as well from afar. She's a young friend of mine over in the UK. Her name is Amy O'Toole. She's 15 years old now, but she was 12 at the time. She actually helped to run a science experiment on the life of bees, the secret life of bees. She was the youngest to take the main TED stage. She was 10 when she became the youngest person to ever publish a peer-reviewed science paper. It's very interesting that Amy is up there on the TED stage talking about the work, but what I love is the enabler there in Bo Lotto. So Bo has provided that space and opportunity for that great engagement and empowerment to take place. So check out Amy's TED Talk, Science is for Everyone. Our third example here is an interesting Melbourne-based collaboration, Songs for a Safe Future. This is a collaboration with Green Music Australia and the School for Climate Strike. Ella is currently in year 8 at a government school here in Melbourne. She got up on a stage at Pause Fest, which is a big international conference that snuck its way in earlier this year. Apparently there were conferences earlier this year. I don't remember them, even though I was sitting next to her. And she actually talked about how that school climate strike turned out to be exponentially bigger than she ever thought. It was her school that enabled some of those structures to allow Ella to go and speak more broadly on how she was able to rally a crowd, which is what she was talking at Pause Fest about. But she now has to do that online. So these are some online examples of how students are already showing agency and engagement. They're already rallying, so we might as well harness it. And the final example that I wanted to show you, and we will, when we head back over into the Miro, you can actually hear this profound voice. It's absolutely gorgeous. This is an example of online student agency and empowerment from a school, a government school in Queensland. It's called Cover Me. And what happens here is students cover current students or past students' songs and vice versa. So it's 100% student created content. This school has produced the likes of Thelma Plum and is led by Brett Wood. So there are some fabulous examples out there, and a lot of the time it's around setting up the structures, putting the invitation out there, and making sure all of those keys to empowerment are considered and put into place as well. Chris, what are we going to do next here? Because what we want to be able to do is to understand, well, what are some of our ideas then around putting that agency into place? Noting that a key concept here that I want us to all think about is simply this, that growing student agency can help individuals overcome adversity. So a lot of our students who are living in disadvantage don't have agency of their own in their lives. So to be able to provide that through learning is something that is incredibly important for us as a pathway and a stepping stone to overcome adversity as well. All right, Chris.
So we're going to pop, just before we do pop back in the Miro, I just do want to pull these because there's some such, the chat is so rich tonight.
So brilliant.
We got Joe, you know, the school captain has a meeting this week, which is wonderful. Richard has his year fives doing weekly news reports online to their peers and parents. I love that. And then Katrina, this is this is doing two, but the other way around, where Katrina had to teach coding and had no idea. So instead gets a group of coding experts from the grades to come in and teach her and teach all the other students, and really that importance and empowerment, and that kind of, what a wonderful example. Zarana, I am not ignoring your comment. I really want to use it to segue into the next section after this Miro. So I'm just going to hold your comment there for a moment. I'm not ignoring your voice. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump back into the Miro, and we're going to ask you and we're just going to spend a couple of minutes doing this.
3 minutes, yep.
Perfect. We are going to actually, sorry, just guys over here, and we're going to come to this part of the board. So if you do want to jump back into the Miro, that would be awesome. And we're going to get you to put down any of those kind of strategies or structures that you have been using to help you to move to, for, and with, in terms of doing things to the students, doing things for the students, and doing things with the students. So what kind of structures and strategies? And again, I'm not sure we've actually ever made this super clear, but I'm now going to make it super clear. Is after this micro course is done, Summer and I will be taking all of the stuff off the Miro board, and we'll put it into a package which we'll send to you. So it'll all be there beautifully summarized. So it's not just that we want to, you know, get you to share your ideas now. We're actually going to capture, immortalize, and share them out across Victorian government teachers.
Yes,
so very
Thanks.
excited by that. So we're going to put 3 minutes on the timer. We're going to have a little listen to one of the songs from the Cover Me project. So if I start that,
beautiful.
and then I come up here and start this.
Now, remember that what's ordinary to you might be extraordinary to others. So that sharing, for example, of that Katrina put in, of getting more senior students to teach younger students, or to, in fact, to teach you, brilliant strategy. Have a think about where that fits on doing learning to, doing learning for, doing learning with. That is certainly doing learning with. All right, 3 minutes. This is absolutely beautiful. So they're two students that are covering each other's work.
Miss my flight, hit the lights by noon. Had about 30 grand in your bedroom, and I wish you missed me back, 'cause I miss you. Ooh, ooh, ooh.
just kicked off yesterday. So if you keep up with Music Industry College, you'll be able to find that, but we'll put the link to this in the link farm.
I made you rush things. And maybe did I drive you crazy? Did I make you mad? 'Cause I think you hate me. Oh, 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 oh,
You wait till the boys cover her.
And honey, it's crashing down on me. And after all I did foresee, the wrong hill I can never melt into your arms. Knowledge started with a fall. I thought I knew myself, I thought
As much as I was enjoying that, I'll pause it there.
I know, it's pretty amazing, isn't it, to think that they're students, so they just opened up the student recording studio and they just let them go. Lots of trust there. All right, Chris.
All right, so we
party that up, that's for sure, but you know, keep playing in there. But I know you've got something for us that's really great as a takeaway.
So yeah, we just want, and there's some more brilliant things in here. So thank you so much, and so I am now going to come across. Oh, sorry. Am I good? Yes, all good.
Yeah.
I'm just making sure I've got the right things open. I am going to come back across to the screen. Click on the share screen. I'm such a smooth operator in this space. No one would notice that I'm just boom. There we go. Straight across there. And what I want to do is actually is to, in fact, I realized I missed those two slides out. Sorry. Is to just bring in the comments from Zarana. So it was lovely to see Zarana talk when we were talking about the idea of agency and kind of gradual release of control within learning, or the shift of the locus of learning from teacher towards student. Is Zarana says that they've built that into their instructional model of instructional. So the unit would be instructional, so teacher 2, interdependent, and then independent. So 2 with and then by.
2 4 with, yeah.
Yeah, so it was really nice to see that in there. So thank you, Zarana, because that does segue nicely into what we're going to just spend just a couple of minutes looking at some really simple strategies that we can use to move that further forward. So what we're going to do is just have a look at a couple of toolkit things. A couple of these we've seen before. There's a couple I'm just going to kind of refresh your memory on. And we're going to get, we want you to take these away and use them in any way which works for you. Oh, that's interesting. Haven't had that one before. Let me just escape out of that and wonder why that did that. Let me try that again. Hold your breath. That's really interesting. Part of it didn't load. I wonder why.
The internet, okay. I'd say.
It's actually the images, which is strange. Anyway, it's obviously the internet is a little bit broken, but that's okay. What I'm going to show you is we've seen this and we've talked a little bit about learning outcomes and that idea of the learning outcomes. And when we talked about one of our design principles is being really transparent with learning, so that students can take ownership of learning and can engage with it. Because if we don't know what the kind of expected learning is, then it's really hard to take any control over that. And I guess the next bit is, well, how do we co-construct some of these things? So using your learning kind of intentions, and whether you do something which is, we just look at a learning intention and success criteria, whether you do something which is a bit more split across to, a kind of split, a split lens. So we look at knowledge and mindset and skill set and tool set. Whatever you do, it's thinking of this through a couple of lenses. First, how do you put this into the learner's hands so that they can unpack the learning intentions in their own context? And one way to do that is to have some kind of board. And I've just done this in a slide, but you could do this in a PowerPoint. You could do it on a Padlet. You know, I think in our first sessions together, we listed all of the possible technologies you could use. But it's actually being able to do some self-assessment. So maybe having I can because I have. And so there are a couple of options in this. Is the teachers might fill this in. So it might be, for example, I can, and I'm just going to go back to my old French ways here. I can talk about the importance of the environment. I remember doing this with my year 12s. And remember, this is a year 12 one. It might be much, and the language and the content would be different, but for different age groups. But I can talk about the importance of the environment in French because I have. And now one of the interesting bits, just make that a little bit smaller, is that maybe this because I have is total choice. So I can do this, but because I have done what I've recorded a podcast, or I have made a short video, or I have done whatever. But the other part of that is for students to say, well, actually, you know what? At the moment, I can't do that. I'm at this part. I'm at this zone, and actually using this kind of traffic light system to move up and down that. Another idea is to help students not only to understand the learning intentions and to have some ownership over learning intentions in the terms of content, process, and product, which I'm going to talk about in a second, but also to co-construct them in terms of saying, and what are your outcomes? You know, these are my learning intentions. What are your learning intentions? It's your learning, after all. This is what I'd love you to learn. What else do you want? And actually giving students the opportunity to do that and to come up with their own learning intentions. And some of the best learning conversations I've had, especially with younger kids, actually, you know, doing some work with grade 1 and grade 2, and we were having learning conversations, is around that, is around the power of young people, and very young people in this case, to talk about their own learning and to say that I've got control over this. It's not what the teacher does. It's really about my choices and what I do. So generating our own individual outcomes there as well. Same thing with different mindsets. You know, we can do some work on thinking about what would be a really useful mindset to adopt here. Even the tool set. So I can use a tool of my choice to demonstrate my learning. So these are really simple strategies to help us to move a little bit more up that ladder. What's missing, and I'll see if I can just grab it into like in a 2-second jump across to a different slide deck to copy these and bring them back. See how quickly I can do this. It might not work, but these badges that that I've kind of made and want to share with you. Let's see if they go in here. Yes, just around skills. So those idea of what skills do you need to work on now, and having some control. And it might be like, I really want to work on my questioning skill, or I really want to work on my own metacognition, which is a word that I'm not sure you want to throw around all the time with young people, but why not? It's a great word to use. But thinking about my learning and thinking about my thinking, I want to work on my reasoning skills, and actually having learners be able to physically drag and drop these things to say, you know what, I've got control over my learning and I am able to see my own learning growth. I think that for me is one of the most powerful things we can do with young people. So a kind of a learning outcomes, and learning intentions and success criteria are in our HITS high impact teaching strategies. They're there. But what we're saying is it doesn't have to be you that says to students, these are the learning intentions and this is how you're going to show me you're successful. We can be much more in that space of co-construction and co-design around those. A really simple one is, of a choice board. So maybe thinking about some of the elements, because Ren, I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but sometimes people like me, teachers, have some control issues, and I want to control everything. And that's just because I want it to be the best experience, and I'm scared of giving up control. But this idea of maybe thinking about the kind of mixing desk of content, process, product, and groups, and thinking, all right, maybe the content's going to be fixed by me. Like that's something we have to learn. But maybe the way you learn it, the process, or even the product that you develop, or the people that you work with, maybe that's a really big area for choice and agency and responsibility. So I might have, a fixed curriculum. I've got these things that I really want you to learn. But in fact, in terms of the process, you could, for example, join the synchronous call, if that's happening. You might watch a recording of the call and add questions to a collaborative document, or you might want to work through the resources at your own pace. And if we're getting to the same outcome of, where our learning growth is enhanced, then, why should I tell you what's the best process for you? And I know suddenly we're kind of thinking as teachers, oh, does this mean I have to set up a bunch of other things? Like, you know, do I now need to set up this resource and that resource? Actually, what I think you can find is that we have created these resources anyway. It's just pushing them into that digital domain has always been one of the issues that has stopped us doing that. And now we're in the digital domain and we're in that remote and flexible learning. There's no reason why we can't do that. And then maybe you have choice over product. So let's make a digital product, a screencast, a presentation, a video. And I always say this, I think, but Jim has some really great thoughts on, you know, the things that kids can make, and does some wonderful work with kids around editing video and video and stuff. But anyway, you might do a digital recording of an analog product, so a photo of an artwork, or you might just do a reflection. And maybe you have a choice over individual, pair, or group. Like we're in a situation where I think things are so out of control that there's no reason we can't throw a little bit more chaos in there and have different people working in different ways. And actually, the payoff of that, I think, is incredible. And a really quick story, very quick story, because I'm just checking the time. When I was a head of languages in a very big secondary school, 2,500 students back in the UK, is we threw out a third of our content in languages because it was just too much. And we introduced this one lesson a cycle. We only had 3 lessons a fortnight, by the way, of French or Spanish. And we introduced one of those lessons was called Flip. And this is in the olden days before Flip was a flipped video thing. This was Flip, which stood for flexible, learner-led, in-time intervention and personalized. And it was all about saying, you know, we've had these 2 input lessons, really rich input. Now's the time for you to develop take agency over this, to own your learning and to see what do you want to work on, set your goals, use these resources. And we had 1 computer per table, which at that time I was like mind blowing. But it's a really interesting thing to allow students to work and to take ownership of their learning in a space of teaching, for example, year 8 French was not traditionally a place where we let students have any control. Kanban board, I'm not going to go over it but it's the idea again of helping kids to chunk down the work and say, what am I working on? And we've got this in the parent guide, so we've got the parent guide in the link for you. Ziki, yes, you have these slides. We're going to give you these slides, absolutely, 100%. So, you know, you might chunk down the task, and students can actually take control of that. Not you saying, do this, do this, do this, and do this at this time, but them actually saying, this is what I have to do. How am I going to work through this? You know, and actually just moving them along. It's a really simple one.
Love Kanbans, so good.
Love a Kanban. We've already covered these in previous ones, so we're not going to spend much time there. But this idea of having a reflection. Oh, it's really interesting that the badge has disappeared from there as well. So I'll just grab it from here.
That's all right. And while you are, Zeke has asked, are we able to access these slides? These are all yours. These are going in the participant slides. You can move them around, do all sorts of fabulous drag and drop things with them. So yes, they are yours.
And so what we've got here is this idea around metacognition and getting learners to reflect on their growth and saying, all of this language is about me. It's about me owning my growth. And if you remember, we could have a learning conversation and you might rate yourself at this level. And for those of you who did the solo taxonomy things last week, this will now all make perfect sense. But what underneath these little boxes, which were supposed to be animated in, I just remembered, this is my things. These are things I'm telling you as a teacher you could do to move you on to the next stage. But actually what I'm really interested in are what are your targets? What are you going to do in order to help yourself move up to that next level in, for example, metacognition? And just like at the time, choices funnel, you know, helping students to make really good choices in their own learning and supporting them in that process. And even things like a reflections menu. So these are all here for you. So one of the things I love, I used to make students write reflections a lot. And I think what happened was they started to see reflection as, oh, thank you, Zeke, getting his name right. So Zeke's name right. So reflections menu, things like what went well, even better if. I used to think, now I think, connect, extend, challenge, 2 strengths and a goal, my next steps, a stand, an appreciation, or an apology. And essentially giving students choice over their reflections. Like, I want you to reflect on your learning 3 times in the next week or so, but do it in whatever way you want. If you want to record a video, which is I used to think, now I think. If you want to do a piece of writing, if you want to do a voice recording. And my favorite one, which comes, I saw done at a school in Doncaster in England, called a stand, an appreciation, or an apology. And I saw this in what was called a and it's probably one of the greatest pieces of learner agency I've ever seen, was in a community meeting. And so I went and visited this school, and it's actually run by a really good friend of mine. And I said to him in the morning, it's like, you mean an assembly, right? So we're going to go into assembly. He's like, no, it's a community meeting. I was like, oh, whatever. 250 students in the room, and he came in with one of those microphones in a soft foam box you can throw around. And so he actually told me just before. He said, we've had some problems on the bus. This is near the start of the school year, and he said we've had some of the year 7s messing around on the bus, and we've had a couple of complaints in from people. So he said, don't worry, it'll sort itself out. And I was like, okay, that's weird. So he got the microphone. He said, all right, a stand, an appreciation, or apology. Anyone want to start? And I still didn't really know what was going on. And then I remember very vividly, it was a year 9 student, a female student. She put her hand up, and he threw the box mic up, and she said, I would really like to make an appreciation for Miss Taylor, who helped me out last week with my work. And I was like, oh, that's really lovely. It's a really nice kind of community building thing. And then it was pushed onto, thrown over, and there were lots of appreciations. And then someone got it, and they said, I just want to make a stand because I've seen some really bad behavior. And this is, by the way, this is another year 9 student. I've seen some really bad behavior on the bus. So I just want to make a stand about it, because that's not the way we are and not the way we represent our school at XP School. And I was like, wow, that's really fantastic. This went on for 45 minutes. And so it was passed around, and it was no assembly led by teachers. It was a community meeting led by students. And this is all part of culture. And it came to near the end of it. And this little boy, a year 7 little boy, had the microphone, and he kind of like was all hunched over, and he put his hand up and got the mic, and he was like, that was actually me messing about on the bus, and I'm really sorry. So he made this public apology in front of the whole school for messing around on the bus. So I just think that idea of, giving that voice and getting learners to make stands for things, making appreciations, or even apologizing is a really interesting kind of student voice piece. We're hitting time some, so
we have hit time, but what we are going to just do a quick recap is to say all of those resources are in the link farm as always. We've had 3 really excellent sessions with you, really finishing here in student agency. And of course, you can always jump onto the Miro as well. We will keep those open, but we will be collating those and making sense of them in a toolkit by you, with you, for you, hopefully not to you as well. When we come back that's a drum roll there.
Yeah.
Our micro course 2, this is what we've got planned. Designing and planning incursions and experiences from home, bringing that joy and levity. We're looking at structures and strategies for asynchronous learning and teaching as well, gathering again from some more things that are emerging that we are gathering in the background for you, and a design sprint around reimagining teaching and learning, particularly your job and your role. So really filling your cup there. Something that we do want to mention in terms of quick next steps is that if you have attended all 3 and registered for all 3 courses, you are now eligible for a micro-credential, a credential in remote and flexible pedagogy design, which is very exciting. That toolkit will be on its way, and of course, we're always here to support you in whatever medium you like. We love chatting to you across LinkedIn, Twitter, etc. The resources. Oh, go on, Chris, please.
No, yeah, I think I was just going to say exactly the same thing. All of those resources are there. So these are the resources specifically from today. So the slides will be coming out to you have they gone out yet? They'll be. Oh, Charlene will make sure that the slide links are working. That'll be me. I'll have done it wrong. We'll get the links to you, and you'll also have the link farm with all the other links that we've had over the previous 3 sessions as well. I want to point out the Miro board, but shall we just say thank you so much to our guests first? Do you reckon, Sam?
I reckon we say a big thank you to Ren. Please keep that student voice nice and loud so that we can start to embed agency and empowerment into all of our learning and all of our experiences. So thank you so much for joining us. I know that your podcasts are going to be out soon, so we'll make sure that everybody has those. And I know the great work that you've been doing through Pivot and the team there, Amanda and Cleo, to really support teachers to ask those right questions of students has made a lifetime of difference for us as well. So that's all in the link farm there for us as well. And Chris has got one final thing. If you feel like continuing to hang out with us and trialing out Miro, what are our key cats, Chris?
So instead of sending you a form which is like just rate what you thought of the micro course out of 1 and 5. Like, you know, those ones where you get like, what was the catering like? Well, we didn't provide meat, so probably pretty low. I'm sure the catering at home was excellent. What we thought we'd do is, rather than do a form, is we'd actually get you to do an activity which we use a lot with people that we're working with, and that I've used a lot with kids, is the good old de Bono's thinking hats, which I'm a huge fan of. But what we're going to do is, you'll see there are bunches of Post-it notes there, and we've divided up the feedback questions for these first 3 micro courses, or first 3 parts of the micro course. We've divided them up into yellow hat, what did you really enjoy about the course? And if you just want to fill that in, that's fine. That's good for our egos. What did you not enjoy? We would love to hear that as well, because we do take our participant voice very seriously. How did the course make you feel? So a bit of red hat thinking. Did you get all the information you needed from the course? So thinking about the facts and the information you've got. Do you have any creative suggestions to improve the course? And what are you going to do with your learnings from the course? Now, you might not use a Post-it note on all 6 of these. You might not have time or indeed desire to do that. But we would love as much or as little feedback from you as you possibly can give us, because we actually genuinely think feedback is a gift. And it really is. And when we talk to our to learners, we know how important that feedback is. So with that, Jim, I think if you can bring us all back in, we'll kind of close up shop here, just while we're enjoying the Miro board. Sam, do you just want to mention a little bit about the registration? I think.
Yep, I can do that. So I will be posting up the new sessions for ARC, on ARC next week. So you won't be automatically registered. Please do go into ARC and register for the next group of sessions. If you register for the first one, that registration will be carried through for all 3 sessions, and they will be on Wednesdays at 3:45. I'm just looking at Summer, she's nodding, so that's good. Yeah, 3:45 on Wednesdays over the next 3 weeks. And I will send out an email. I sent one out on Sunday with links to all of the materials that have been developed so far, but I'll send another one out after today, which will have, or after tomorrow, sorry, which will have the links for both Tuesday, Wednesday sessions and all the recordings and everything that you could need. So that'll probably come out on Thursday, I would think. So yeah, thanks for joining us, and it's been great. Even though we've run a little bit over time, I appreciate the fact that there's still lots of people online and joining us.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Sam. We really appreciate it. Jim, is it time for awkward wave farewell?
I think it is time for that. I love that.
No other way
to be a part of this.
You are, Ren. Enjoy the awkward waves, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Bad that I'm just going to let this go on for a while. No.